Could Ripple be the swift killer that we've all been hoping it would be? And what does this mean for the price of XRP? How high could it go? Well, we went into all these questions with Crypto Sensei in the latest episode of the podcast, and I already know that you guys are going to want part 2 of this interview. Let's get into it. So, tell me all about this video that you're making about XRP.
You want me to show you instead of telling you?
Sure.
Might as well, right? Okay, let me share screen here. Oh, wait, host to say, can you give me host so I can share?
Yeah, I can do that. Wait, there's always something that gets in the way. Okay.
If you can, it's all good. But I just I was working for a long time yesterday. All right, so check this out, bro.
Okay.
All right, so you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so that's not it. I think this is it. Okay, yeah, this is it. Okay, so we kind of start with like the history of the XRPL, right? And then we kind of move into how the logo was created, right? The golden rule. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's really interesting. And then I have a video explaining what the golden rule is, or the golden ratio, right? And this is kind of why they chose this exact logo, right? And then, get into FedNow, right? What is FedNow? What is the mission? Who the partnerships are with FedNow, connecting Volante with FedNow, and then connecting Volante with, of course, Ripple with the VolPay system, right? So we work through FedNow, and then there's some other things happening too with Volante and HCL Tech, right? So we work our way through this, right? And then we get into HCL Tech, and then we get into SEPA, right? Because this new partnership is just set up, connecting. I can't remember exactly. Was it Trangelo, connecting them with the SEPA system?
Yep.
And so that's 36 countries, right? And so I work my way through that, and then here's the article. And then ACI worldwide, right? ACI is huge, right? 9 out of 10 banks, 80,000 merchants, bill pay, and you come all the way down here, and you have just a ton of, look, 25 billion cloud transactions annually, 225 billion transaction customers process, 6,000 customers worldwide. They're connected to Ripple. And then you have Accenture who's connected to Ripple. These guys are connected, ACI is connected to Swift as well. And then, so we work our way through that. And then, so someone put out there's a bunch of chat GPT stuff here. And then of course you have the Bank of England stuff, proof of concept, going through that. Right. Bank of England mentions Ripple in their new CBDC consultation paper, going through all this information, Royal Bank of Canada, and then going through Project Icebreaker, right? Going through Project Ubin, just kind of showing some connections there and what the technology is being used right here. You got R3 Corda, Ethereum, and Quorum. And then just more connections, and then you got HSBC connections, going through all these banks, and then you got Enbridge, and then Palau, kind of connecting the smaller countries that wanted to work with Ripple, moving our way through here. And then so I found this list of banks, right? There's 139 banks on this list. So I did 139 Google searches and ChatGPT searches for their outflow of payments, like how much are they making in payments per year. And a lot of these are Japanese banks, and I couldn't find. So out of the 139 banks on this list, it's 139, 140. Oh, that's my Glacier. Sorry, more work. So I figured out that there's 49 out of 139 banks I could find information from. And I always went down in numbers. There's basically $159 trillion, give or take, yearly outflows and payments on these banks worldwide. And this is just 49 out of 139 banks I could find information on, right? This is including like the Bank of England, CHAP system, and some other stuff, but it's a very small list considering how big Ripple is, right? And then I was going to kind of finish showing the real-time growth settlement system. CHAPS in England processes 822 billion pounds a day. And just kind of go through it. And then I still have a lot of work to do kind of finishing up. I was going to finish it up with like the token. There's 5,400 different token pairs, the Monica Long tweet. And then I was going to get into the 1,700 contracts that have to do with the escrowed XRP that we don't even know what that's about yet, right? And so, that was about $160 trillion, just those 49 banks that I could find information on. So, you go through Chat GPT and you run some simulations. Obviously this is not always going to be exactly accurate, but I've been running just simulation after simulation after simulation after simulation. I'm just going to throw it all together in one video and really kind of show people why this is stop video. Is that it? No, stop share. New share. Damn, see, I did not know how to use what's it called, but yeah, that was kind of How do I stop? Oh, stop share. Thank you. That's kind of like my thought process, bringing all of that information together in one video. I know it's going to be kind of longer, but I really want to make a video people can't deny. You know what I mean? Because you do have these groups of people that get into, you make certain friends and their tweets kind of bounce off you, and you get into this very stuck area where you can't reach out and look at newer technologies and look at new innovation and really grow. And that's what's the most important time, right, about all this. And so, I see, people say BTC Maxis, Ethereum Maxis, XRP Maxis. I don't mind being called an XRP Maxi because I really believe in the technology above everything else. But I also have, my hands in other pies, right? But I think, we all need to come together and really understand that the world is changing very quickly. And there's a very good opportunity for all of us to make life-changing decisions, right? Of course, we are not financial advisors. We are just some really excited individuals who love the space, who love to research it and really put things together for people to really show them how important these next couple months or these next couple years are, right? And so that just kind of, it gets me fired up in the morning, man. So,
yeah,
that's a video, man.
You have certainly earned, when this video comes out, I knew this about you from beforehand, but in the XRP community, you will have earned what I call the Deep Diver Award. I've even got clothing coming out in later this month, and one of them is the Deep Diver, and I'm going to be sending it out to a select few who do their like real research, and just by the sheer amount of tabs that you had open there, I think you deserve the Deep Diver Award.
Well, that's nothing, man. Like my average Sensei chat. So I do 2 chats a week in my community, right? And they usually go an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours. The last couple of weeks, they've been going about 2 hours because there's just so much information to go over, and it's just not. You can't just bring one. It's not just XRP, right? You have XLM, you have Casper, you have HBAR, Algorand. There's so many good projects, and there's so much stuff happening at once. So I really kind of, sometimes I have 80, 90, 100 tabs open, and I'll just go through it in a very, sometimes correctly ordered and sometimes not. Yeah. But no, man, it's just exciting, bro. I get really excited. I get fired up when I think about all the research, and it's fun, man. Like, aren't you having fun? I know you're tired, but you're having fun.
I'm loving it. I work tirelessly on things that I love doing, and I'm working tirelessly. Yeah, so I love it. I love it. And many of those tabs I've had open myself on my own screen in the journey. Some of them I haven't. So I greatly look forward to watching that video.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Considering you've got your hand in so many different areas, there's something been playing on my mind that I haven't really explored in a video properly yet.
Okay.
And it's been touched on. I talked with R3 about CBDCs, and
I watched that.
These are guys really with hands-on operations with real CBDCs so that when they give me a timeline of 18 to 24 months before we start seeing pockets of utility, that's probably what's going to happen, right? Regardless of how much we try and will utility to happen, we can will speculation movement, we can will hype, but we can't will utility. That has to come when it comes. But the one thing holding utility back is interoperability. And so I was going to do some sort of deep dive on all of the projects that are offering some sort of interoperability platform that would actually enable these technologies to work with each other, and the idea of having XRP as a neutral bridge asset for everything, for example. Like phone SIM cards, you could trade using XRP. Do you know of any interoperability projects just the top of your mind that might be of interest?
You'd have to start with Quant, right? Quant is probably the key. Quant is probably the most interoperable, project in the game right now, right? 3 lines of code. Any enterprise solution can come in, run these 3 lines of code and work on all these different blockchains. So you'd always have to, I think, start with Quant, and then, you can work your way into like XRP and of course XLM, right? Because you have similar technology, similar partnerships, right? And then you kind of spurs out from there, right? I think you got HBAR is definitely interoperable, Algorand, anything that's kind of ISO compliant has to be, right? So you got IOTA as well, right? Internet of Things. I mean, yeah, that can like spider web down into a whole bunch of different things. But I think if you start, with those types and then you kind of work your way through all the connections there, interledger protocol, all that stuff, I think you're going to find a really good video at the end of all of it.
Yeah. I know the one thing that keeps pulling me back to thinking quant may not be the answer for everything, for example, is just little comments that they were making, like there's going to be a stack of technology that's going to basically be part of this ecosystem. But then, and we kind of understand that stack being like the ISO batch of tokens.
Yeah.
But then also, he was talking about how different companies, different countries will require very specific technologies to make very specific needs met. And so that makes me think back to, who is it? Standard Custody.
Yep.
They are working not with just the ISO tokens, but there's about 32, 33, 34 tokens that they're basically going to be bringing through to the new system to do this custody and all that kind of stuff. And it makes me think, we look at the ISO tokens right now as just as what they are. There's only 6 or 7 or whatever there is.
Yeah.
But there is going to be a large amount of them that are brought into this ecosystem. So I think quant is in a position right now where it can kind of handle everything that's under it right now. But there might be very specific requirements for interledger protocol. Well, for interoperability.
Yeah.
That require different companies, different projects, different blockchains.
I think they have to make it as easy as they can to bring Web 2 into Web 3. And usually when you've succeeded is when somebody's using a Web 3 product and they can't even tell that they're using it, right? So that's really when you can say, we're there, right? The great thing about what you said there is, you said a lot of stuff, but what you talked about is there's going to be other tokens and other opportunities that come in with this interoperability. What the great part about it, a lot of people don't understand is, all this technology has been tested the last 10 years, right? And so you start tracking down timelines of when things came out and, when did XDC chain go live, right? And so you can see that maybe the Project Ion, the testing of that atmosphere with the DTCC started before the XDC came out and before even the bridge to Corda was built, right? So they were testing probably the XRP bridge, and that's what they probably are using to make those settlements, right? So I always come to this part where there are going to be many winners in the space, but what are the winners now? Who's using and testing the technology? And you can really minimize, because there's only, like you said, 6 or 7 that we legitimately know about that are ISO compliant, right? Of course, it's the company that's the compliant. It's not the token. And I think people misjudge that, right? And so it has to have, KYC and anti-money laundering. It has to have all of these things to work in this ecosystem, right? And so I just think that that's a great video to make. And I think you could even make that kind of spider webs into other videos too, right? And there's a lot of other things you could do with that as well. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I made somewhat of a connection, whether it's right or wrong. I'm like always happy to be wrong, because I don't kind of claim to be an expert. I'm just kind of like learning as I go. And so there's some connections that you make out along the journey when your research where it's not explicitly said, but you've made the connection. So nothing's official. I kind of went out on a limb and suggested that maybe there's a pretty decent connection between JPMorgan and XRP, which has people riled up. I think JPMorgan has a massive role in everything anyway.
Of course.
But I was wondering if there are any connections that you've made that aren't official but make complete sense.
So I've seen a lot of PDFs that have JP Morgan's name on them going back as far as like 2014 and 15, where they've actually tested, sandbox tested XRP and worked with Ripple and these types of things. I know Jamie Dimon is on the fence of, crypto is pet rocks, but they understand that they are the incumbent here and that if they don't change and adapt with the current norm of what's happening with digital money and digital payments, that they'll get left behind, right? JP Morgan will be a bank that'll go down in history as one of the greatest failures if they don't adapt, right? And that's what you have right now, right? Because you have all the, right, we saw in 320, which was the Swift migration to ISO. And then over the last couple of weekends, we've seen all these banks updating to digital banks, right? And so now is the time, right? I put a tweet out about this. I said, hey, if you're a banker, let's think about the current system, right? Banks are mostly insolvent right now, right? Unrealized losses are as high as $1 to $2 trillion. They've said it, 620 billion, but it really is a little bit higher, 1 to 2 trillion between the regional banks and the larger banks, right? So you have this gap of banks needing money, needing liquidity, right? You have people being able to take their money out of their bank at a lot faster pace with their cell phone. And so they're going to try to work to stop that. I think the next bank run, I think the bank will go down for maintenance and you won't be able to do those transfers. But kind of getting back to that train of thought there, I do think we're getting to a point where this technology is going to be, it has to be adopted by these banks because they don't have money for the correspondent banking system anymore, right? They don't have money to leave around in other accounts and Vostro accounts around the world, and they need the money now. And not only do they need the money now, but they can save 30 to 60, maybe even higher each transaction using Ripple, or using RippleNet saving 30, or using ODL and saving 60, right, or higher. So I asked the question, if you run a business and you need money and you can use this new technology to make your business even better, offer more services, get more clients, bring more money into the bank, you're going to rush to do that. And that's what we've seen. But the question is now is, when do they start using it? When does it go full scale, right? We know they've updated. So what is that time, right? And just to kind of bounce off that too, Swift, right? They did the testing March 1st. They brought in 12 banks, right? And if you actually take all 12 banks, you Google, you start looking at those banks, right? All of those banks have connections back to Ripple. Like 11 out of 12 of those banks have connections back to Ripple, right? And you've seen what Graham Bright, I think his name was, he's a former Swift head. He's all, you're probably going to see XRP flow over the Swift network. And I said this a long time ago. I said XRP and RippleNet are going to white label Swift. That is probably what's going to have to happen because how does Swift get to Swift GPI that doesn't have instant settlement? How do they get from that to like, hey guys, we have CBDCs now, we have instant settlement now, we have all of these great things now. How does that work without there's a piece missing there, right? There's a huge chunk missing, and you start to make those connections. Like 11 out of 12 banks you connect back to Ripple, they're working with they have to be working with some type of that, right? Because these banks have already tested it. They know they love it, right? They know it excites them. So, down they go with Swift, and then they're having a party, and within like 2 or 3 weeks, they're like, sandbox done, we're all good, guys, we're ready to go, and they updated. So I think there's some incredible announcements to come, and I think I really do. When people say XRP is going to go to 10 grand or 20 grand, I really think you're underestimating the value that this token can go to. And I know people are like, hey, no one's going to put 15 trillion, $20 trillion into a cryptocurrency. You're thinking about it the wrong way. You have to think about the value that's added to the blockchain. And then you have to think of how many payments are going through that blockchain, right? If you're constantly leaning millions and millions of XRP per second to facilitate transactions, and there's a low supply of XRP on the market, the price of XRP is going to skyrocket. And that's the hard part that people cannot disconnect from. They just assume that people are going to dump 15, $20 trillion into this, but it's really, it's the use case and the utility that drives the price, right? In the escrow.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the escrow is supposed to be used for?
I'll tell you. So what I personally think the escrow is used for is to pay back the world debt, right? You have the U.S. is 32 trillion. All the NATO partners are, 3 trillion, 2 trillion. Japan's like 2 trillion. I think there was a deal made, or if they didn't make this deal, they should have made this deal. But make a deal, and I think that's what the 1,700 contracts are for on this XRP NDA. So I think a deal was made, right? And so check this out. So I met with Patrick from Reaper Finance, and he said some stuff to me, and I was rattling around my head for a long time, and I just asked him some questions, but he said that there's actually a very low supply of XRP on the open market. And I've been trying to confirm how much XRP is literally on the open market or on exchanges that can be used at any given time. I'm really trying to find out that number, because if we can find out there's only like 5 or 10% really that's not accounted for, then we can kind of understand maybe when this is going to happen. But back to the theory about the central banks. Why wouldn't you make a deal, right? How else? So the people that get hurt in these global resets are the banks, and their banks are their fans, right? And they don't want to hurt the banks, so the banks would need to be repaid and made whole. So what I think happened is, I think there was a deal that was done with certain systemically important banks and certainly countries, right? And so I think there was maybe a price set, or in the future, and Black Swan Capitalist, I think you had you talked to him, and he said that he had a friend that worked at the Australian Central Bank, and there was a preset price for XRP. There's no way for us to confirm that. So I always kind of like to think of different theories, but I do think that is because, I mean, where else are you going to generate all that money, right? You can't, even if you took gold and you 10x gold, we still wouldn't have enough gold to pay off, the current, and we don't even know how much gold we have in the Federal Reserve. So I do think there was a deal made, because why is XRP the only cryptocurrency project or digital asset project that was created a long time ago that has half of the tokens escrowed in a time lock escrow? Why did they think to do that? There was a reason they did that. And I think the reason we have not found out yet, but that is my personal belief. And that would have been a great way to do it, right? You trash XRP, you trash Ripple, you sue them, you want to push everybody out, you bring regulation, you're trying to push everybody out of the market before you have to fully adopt it, right? Because the FedNow payment system uses, if you're going to have instant settlement with FedNow, you're probably going to be using Ripple, right? But I just think there was a deal that was made, and there's not a lot of XRP on the open market. That's what Patrick told me. And so if you can find the number of XRP, then we could really kind of start working with models of, hey, if tomorrow ODL was handling $1 trillion in payments and there's only 5% or 10% on the open market, what would the price of XRP need to be? And then you can kind of build the model, right? What does 5 trillion a day look like? What does 10 trillion a day look like? Because there are way too many banks, and there are way too many central banks for you to think they're not going to be trillions of dollars moved through the system a day. If you're living in a fantasy land, if you don't think that the XRP ledger was built for high performance, high throughput, slow and cheap transactions, moving $30 million, or was it moving $50 million in 3 seconds for 30 cents? I think the gentleman said. That is the new system, and that's what's going to work. And that's kind of like my full belief on what I think is going to happen with central banks, because then you could pay off all the debt, right? And you could start over, you could have a fresh reset, and nobody would be rioting, nobody would be doing anything, because not only the banks would be happy, but now you shower the citizens with universal basic income. And a lot of people are like, the rich people are going to be upset, right, if the financial system resets. But rich people only make up what, 1% or 1.5% of population, right? You're really worried about the people that are not rich, right? The regular everyday citizens that have 400 million guns in this country, right? Those are the people you worry about. So I think this whole system is bound to crash sooner or later. I think next month the Fed is going to raise another 0.25 basis point, which is going to put more pressure on the banks. And then they're going to hope CPI falls, down to 4 or 3% over these next 4 months. If it doesn't, once the Fed pivots, usually if you look back at the last 6 decades, once the Fed pivots, the market crashes, right? Because that's when something's broke, right? Because they wouldn't pivot unless something didn't break. So that's when you're going to see dumping of markets, right? But my question is, are people going to leave the crypto market? I'm not, and I know you're not, and a lot of your followers are not. I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to leave the stock market, and I think some of that money is going to go into the digital asset market, because you have MICA coming in 2024. The US is going to have to get off their bum and do regulations. So we're really getting to that point, that inflection point where the system is breaking, banks are insolvent, and I do think they're going to try to print another $2 to $5 trillion, and then the system will collapse, right? And that's when you have a financial reset. If we can get to that point, I do think we get to that point. But then all the value, understand this, on a complete collapse, all the value wakes up in the digital world now, right? Because they've moved all of these, security clearing, all this stuff to digital. And so now that you have the DTCC Live and all these other big custody banks, State Street and all these big guys, they've all moved to a digital back end, right? And so stocks, bonds, equities, gold, silver, everything is going to be digitized, put on these ledgers, and that is where a lot of the value is going to come from. So you not only have all of that value, but then you have the throughput on payment volume. I would be shocked if in 10, 20 years, XRP is not like 100 grand or even bigger, because I think you're going to get a massive supply shock. right? Because I'm not going to sell my XRP for $10, $20, $100. I'm not, because I know it's that much. I know it's extremely valuable. It's more valuable than gold right now, right? You can go buy an ounce of gold for like $2,000, or you can buy $2,000 worth of XRP. Do you think you're going to make more money on that ounce of gold, or do you think you're going to make more money on it? I mean, we're not financial advisors, but that just common sense to me, right? So I think all of that is kind of in. I like to be right, because I think that is the easiest and best way to pay off the debt. You cannot just blow the system up and not pay the debt, right? Something has to happen, and you can't print that money, right? Because the money's already kind of worthless at that point. So where do you get the money? That's the question.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a lot.
I struggle with these two extremes. One extreme I struggle with is the idea that there's a crash, ICE 9 type stuff happens. They block everyone's banks and everyone's rioting. No one's eaten for 3 days, and it's kind of like this weird situation there. I also struggle to believe that the switch gets flipped in silence and no one really notices the change. So it's kind of like for me, the clearance of debt immediately, I always think about, when that's brought up, I think about how the average person will actually see that in real life, or if they will, or like, because you can't go from a situation where you've got banks collapsing left and right, and it's on the news and everything, and then it's just gone. Like, do people just not realize and just carry on with their life and go, oh, I've got an extra $2,000 a month now from the government?
Well, I think that's where you have like BlackRock that owns kind of, each news agency. They own the hospitals and the badges and Band-Aids and gauze, and then they own all the gun manufacturers, right? And so they really control the narrative of all of that shit. And really, if you're getting your news strictly from just the mainstream, you're missing everything, right?
Yeah.
You're waiting for things to happen that are bad, and then that's what gets reported. So you are never ahead if you're waiting for something on the news, right? And you really got to dig deep and find all that stuff out. Man, you said something, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but I had a really good. I think what were you just talking about? You're talking about
riots or UBI and not knowing anything that's happened.
It was like the first thing you were talking about.
Struggling with believing extremes.
No, it had to do with XRP. Sorry, I'm very PhD, and then I squirrel, you know what I mean? No, I just think we're in for a really interesting, like, this is the most interesting time to be alive. I don't know if you kind of zoomed out on that perspective too, right? Like, if you lived 50 years ago, no, but if you lived 50 years from now, you would still miss this inflection point, right? And this is really the most exciting point. Oh man, I lost it, but no, you had a very valid point there.
I'm really interested in your the escrow 1700 contract thing. It's got my mind going. I wonder, if it's set up in escrow, I believe, because on the Zum wallet, I don't know if you have a Zum wallet.
Yep.
When you set up an escrow account, you have to set the terms for the account beforehand.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you can go back in and modify it.
I don't think you can.
So in light of that, one could deduce that when an escrow contract is created, it's created, and that's what happens. That's what gets executed. And so if that's how the XRP ledger works, when an agreement is contracted in there and it stays there, then the 1700 contracts it's predetermined with a time or a trigger event.
That's what I was thinking about. Flip the switch. When you said flip the switch, sorry, we're back now. So you're on the right path right there. I think the flip of the switch moment is what we were talking about earlier, with banks deciding today is the day we start using the new system, right? And the new system, the old system are going to run parallel, right, till November 2025, and then everyone will be forced into the new system. But if you're a bank trying to stay a bank, you have to update, right? You cannot wait, because the bank across the street's already updated, right? So you have all these people, and I think the flip of the switch and what you're talking about here is the moment that banks start using it on a massive scale, right? And that is what I think the escrow, I think there's a date, right? Because all these NDAs have to have dates on them, right? They don't just go forever. I think most NDAs have a 5-year or 10-year clause or whatever it is, right? So what is the end date on all these NDAs? And why hasn't one come up yet that we know about, right? I've never heard or seen anything to do with, a contract that had to do with the XRP escrow that went to a certain amount to a certain person or company or country. So I do think there's a date, and people in the background know it. We don't know it. I guess Mr. Poole is a time traveler. He knows what's going to happen, but it's just such an interesting ecosystem. And you have all these really incredible people working along the same lines, all from different backgrounds, right? And it really is an exciting space, right? And you really, if you don't pay attention right now, you will regret this time of your life for the rest of your life. I saw when the market crashed early 2022, and I shifted my community from like a major DeFi community to just learning about the best, like XRP, XLM. I totally shifted my whole community. And I did that for a reason, because I saw that, hey, we're going to be in a bear market for at least a year, and then we're going to pretty much be into regulation, right? By end of 2023, 2024. So I was like, if I keep showing my community DeFi projects that might not have the best use cases, that might not be around, I'm doing them and myself a disservice, right? So I completely shifted. I started mainly talking about XRP, XLM, and the top 10, 15 most utility-driven cryptos. And I do think that there is that inflection point. There is that date that once we get past that date and it starts going, who's going to stop it, right? Because now you have SWIFT, you have, central banks, right? And so here's a question for you, right? We know Ripple's talking to at least 20 central banks, right? We don't know how many they're going to sign up, but all of that sovereign money, is that going to live on the XRPL, or does that live in a side system? Because the value is going to be there, right? So if they create $20 trillion in sovereign, money, and if they're using the XRPL on a side chain, is that value on the XRPL? That would make sense to me. If it's not, where is it going, right? So what happens when you get all the central bank money on there too? So now you have trillions and trillions of dollars of central bank sovereign money. You have all of this commodity and bond and the derivatives market, or even the FX market, right? The derivatives market is a $1 quadrillion market. Have you put in, what would happen if the derivatives market went on the XRPL? I mean, what do you think XRP, the price needs to be to facilitate that?
Well, Deutsche Bank have the largest derivatives.
Yep.
And so essentially, I think the conclusion you can draw from that is, first of all, Deutsche Bank are heavily on the side of ISO 20022. They've got a whole education suite on that whole thing, which I loved watching, even though it's mindlessly boring for the outsider to look at. So considering they're very much embracing the new system, they're very much aware of Ripple and the technology that lays in there. If Deutsche Bank went down, or something happened there, and then they just applied the Deutsche Bank derivatives and put those on the ledger, the price would go like, I forgot what the price was, but just Deutsche Bank on its own would put the price up to like $700 or something. Just Deutsche Bank.
Yep.
And I don't even think that even more, probably.
I think it would go up even more. I think because when can you imagine? I mean, you know what the FOMO is right now, right? And we know if Ripple comes away with a win or some type of settlement with a win, right? All they care about is XRP, and secondary sales are not securities. That's all they care about, right? They don't care about paying a fine. They don't care about this early shit. They just care about that one fact, right? And so if they can get that, the FOMO around that will probably bring the price $5, $10, $20, depending on how much FOMO it is. But that is really the shock, right? That's the thing that you're talking about there. Adding, 100 trillion or 200 trillion in derivatives on that value on the XRPL, it was built for it. I think that's when we come back to this conversation of the escrow and why they did the things that they did, or why are they so compliant. I think this is all pointing to Ripple, right? Because you've been testing, digital derivatives these last couple of years. What have you been testing it on, right? And these derivatives are in a bunch of different currencies, right, all over the world. So you need something that's like a bridge asset, right? You're not going to use like HBAR or Algorand for that. You're going to need some type of bridge asset. And we know that there's only two or three solid ones of those. It's going to be XRP or it's going to be XLM. So which one has the most influence around the world? That's XRP. I mean, they have IMF, they're in the World Bank, they're at the BIS, they're at all these different places, right? We've seen these meetings. why isn't anyone from, I don't want to say why isn't anyone from Bitcoin doing these meetings, but you get what I'm saying, right? Take any other company's name and put it there. Why aren't they having these meetings? Why aren't they at the World Economic Forum? And I don't agree with everything the World Economic Forum says and does, but I do think people have a problem with the world programmable money. I think we need to look at this from a government's perspective. And I know we don't always want to do that, but you have to understand where it's coming from so you can fully understand the situation, right? So the government has to have programmable money. There's a couple of reasons, right? So UBI, Universal Basic Income, will be government money given to you. So if you take that money and you go buy a gun and you go shoot somebody, now the government just helped you go and shoot somebody. So, or if you go buy drugs or whatever it is, whatever your vice is, obviously the government doesn't want you spending, they want you spending the money on your kids and your groceries, right? So it has to be some type of programmability. You just can't get around that. And I think a lot of people are like, the government's going to spy. Of course they're going to spy. They're spying on you now. I mean, they can pull your telephone calls out of the air at this point. So, we need to accept this is where we're going. We need to be able to have smart conversations about, setting some policy about them not snooping and what happens if they do or they get caught. But it has to be some type of programmable, and also too, I mean, this, but they're going to say, hey, you're going to have to spend 80% of this money in this month. You're going to need to do that because they don't want rolling over. They need the money going back to the economy. They need people spending, and that's the best way to get people spending. Again, everyone gets $3,000 a month. You're going to have another line of people with $1,000 payments that can't afford it, right? And that's a whole nother story and subject, right? The U.S. economy and where that's going, but there's so much going on, so much to follow. I'm really interested. I'd love to get your input. I don't know how much time you have, but what do you think about BRICS, man?
Oh my goodness. So I have had a little brainwave yesterday about this. So BRICS stands for, quite obviously, Brazil, India, so on and so forth. But when does like hundreds of countries, or like 100 countries as part of BRICS, you can't call it BRICS anymore.
Well, it's called BRICS Plus.
Yeah. Yeah, but it kind of made me think, that we won't refer to it as BRICS anymore. We might say BRICS Plus, but I don't think the US would like the fact that it's not BRUCS, for example, with USA in it. I don't think they would like that. And so I just imagine that the word BRICS is just going to dissolve, and it's just going to be the new way it is. Like the new powers that are ruling. There's one worry that we don't know how far, kind of do know how far the US will go to protect what they have. That's worrying. But I'm also curious how the US are actually even going to handle this, because I don't even know how you work around such an influential overcoming of power, like they're really taken over.
Yeah.
What would you do if you were Biden, or not Biden?
Well,
whoever's controlling him.
I'd probably check myself into like an old folks home and just chill out for the rest of my life, man. But no, I mean, Biden's 80, Trump's 76. So they're both, no matter who wins, or it seems like that's going to be round two of them, like Rocky 2 or whatever. They're both going to be either the oldest president ever existed, right? So Trump's only 4 years younger than Biden. I know Biden looks a lot older and he looks like ancient granddad, but he's only 4 years. So, we're really dealing with the oldest people in the room here and having to do that. But I don't think Biden has any control over what the BRICS nations do. I think when Russia invaded Ukraine, okay, Russia didn't expect it was going to take a year, or they thought they would get it done in 3 days, right? They didn't even bring extra ammunition, food, or gas when they tried to invade, Kiev. So, all of this stuff is wrong. But so now the U.S. is fighting a proxy war in Ukraine, and that's perfect for the U.S. because it does give manufacturers of weapons, manufacturers of body armor and vehicles and bandages, all that stuff. All of these businesses in the U.S. are now producing all this stuff in mass to send over, right? We sent over a lot of our older things. We did send some Bradley tanks, but this is helping the U.S. kind of stay out of a recession right now. If we didn't have all this extra money being spent to kind of fund this, I don't think I think the U.S. probably would have gone into a recession. And I was watching this channel on YouTube. This guy used to be a CIA spy chief, and he was talking about all this stuff. It's really interesting. But I think the U.S. is going to be kind of done. But Russia didn't expect all the businesses, the private businesses, to walk away from them, right? And so China sees that. So the US is actually being strategic right now. They're allowing Russia to deplete all of their best weapons, all of their best ships, all of, all their, I mean, they've sunk their some of their best cruisers, and they're spending millions and millions and billions of dollars on all these weapons, and they're blowing them all up, right? So on one hand, the US is not even in a war, but they're depleting one of their biggest enemies out of all of their men, power, I mean, everything, right? And so now you really just have to worry about China. So I think the US is being strategic from that point. As long as we can keep Ukraine in the fight, we are depleting one of our enemies, right? That's how the US looks at it. And then they just have to worry about China. So I saw something that China is going to invade Taiwan in the next couple months. That would bring us all into a World War III, right?
Yeah.
China has to watch out, right? Because if the same thing happened to China that happened to Russia, China would be devastated if private companies walked out of China like they did like they did Russia. But the biggest problem with this too, and the reason why all of this stuff is happening with the BRICS nations, is that the US froze Russia out of $600 billion in this SWIFT system, right? And they're going to use that money to give back to Ukraine to rebuild. All the other countries that have US dollars looked at that and said, we need to run as fast and as far as possible, right? Because if you're, MSB or Mohammed's, the guy who runs Saudi Arabia, right? The Prince Mohammed, I can't remember his full name, bin Salman. Okay, so if you're him and you have billions and billions of dollars in the US system, you're thinking like, shit, if I do something the US doesn't like, they're going to So that's why you see the end of the petrodollar. That's why you see this new BRICS currency, right? But let's talk about the BRICS currency if you have the time. Brazil has a lot of connections to Ripple, right? One of the biggest providers of remittances got permission from the Central Bank of Brazil to set that up in Brazil, right? You go over to India, similar situations, right? You have a lot of Ripple partnerships. You can't really confirm everything, but I do think XRP could be used as a bridge asset in between all of those digital currencies, right? And then you go to Africa, same thing, right? Ripple and Stellar have built out all their stuff, so they have infrastructure in all these countries. In 2019, actually, Ripple did a sandbox with the Russian central bank for a CBDC. And then China, obviously, right? So you have all of these connections. What do all of these countries need? They need a super liquid bridge asset to go in between all of their currencies, right? And so there's only so many of those, man, right? And there's only so many of those that have been tested in these countries already. You can't just create a new project and get into a central bank meeting the next day. You need years, right? So, I see a lot of people commenting like, oh, something new will come up tomorrow, and then they'll adopt that. That's great, and I appreciate your thought on the matter, but it's not how things work in the real world. The government is really bad usually about creating new technology. They always have a private company build it, and then they take it over, right? That's how things work, because the government is too busy with the infighting, and so there's just so many of these developments that are happening, and all of this is pushing dollars back into the US, all while we're having this banking crisis. I mean, it really is well played by Russia and China, right? This is the move that would hurt the US the most. I think people are worried that the US is going to collapse overnight. I don't think that's a possibility, right? You still have, you can't have the number one currency that all these banks trust is the Chinese yuan, right? That's the communist China party. You can't really feel very good if that is the world reserve currency, right? So I think they're going to create their own private currency backed by their 5 currencies, backed by gold. And that is going to be like a super SDR type asset, right? They're going to build their own basket, SDR type. I think a lot of people get confused too when we talk about SDRs and digital tokens. I think a lot of people think like XRP is going to become an SDR. I think what's going to happen is they're going to have their own sovereign dollars, and those will be the SDRs. Those will be the digital SDRs, right? And I don't think you can I don't think you can have XRP as an SDR, but I do think you could use XRP to grease the wheels and make a bridge asset. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I do believe that in order to be added to the basket of SDRs, at the very least, a country has to adopt it as their currency.
Well said.
And then there's other things like no private person can own an SDR. And then there's like millions of XRP probably in dust in all the wallets. And it's just it's not really feasible. And I've explored SDRs a lot. I've made plenty of videos about SDRs. And I love that I've been able to learn that system because it is very niche and complex. But I think the thing that makes most sense is for them to make their own SDR basket, like you said, back it by a precious metal, like gold, for example, or even a basket of commodities, back it based on a whole basket of them. That would be fine too. But then the transference of value throughout the whole thing would be done by a single bridge asset. That would make sense. And I think it's about making sense. It's about making things simple, Occam's razor. And I think, and I like that you've said that a lot in this conversation, that the easiest way to do it, the simplest way to do it, that is very important. And I think they do look at it like that. Because why would you go through a whole convoluted way of doing things if there's no point? You make it as easy as possible to have the biggest impact. And I believe that and so do you, that we're positioned in the right assets. I have to cut it off here because I'm a little bit late for a meeting, but I would say we must do a part 2.
Okay, I'll be here, man.
Let's do it again. I already know the audience would have loved this one. And so let's see what happens over the weekend, because by the time this goes live, more banks might have gone down. The dollar might have absolutely come up. Who knows? We'll revisit. But please do tell everyone where they can find you.
I appreciate you, man. Tell everybody. So Twitter, Crypto Sensei, it's CRYPT0_SENSII. Or you can cryptonaires.com, CRYPTONAIRZ, cryptonaires.com. And we have a deal right now. If you want to join our community and really kind of start growing with me, and I do these chats twice a month usually. Like I said, we do have a discount of Spring 40, which is 40% off for life. And so if you're interested in joining and growing and learning from somebody like me and my team, we'd love to have you. And I'm excited about part 2, man. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope people not only got value, but also maybe open their minds and up to new things and new ways to look at things. That's really what all these conversations should be about.
Absolutely. I appreciate every minute of your time that you gave me there.